Welcome, listeners, to www.ironradio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. Thanks for listening. Welcome, Iron Radio listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. Phil is away. He actually had an injury in the gym at football practice, I believe. And then Mike is at a conference, and Jarrell is out this week as well. So just a quick bit of news, a little bit of housekeeping, and then we're going to do the topic today, top bodybuilding questions answered. So a briefer episode, but bear with me and we'll get through some of this. First, let's do the housekeeping. Behind the scenes, we are transitioning to Dr. Nelson handling the syndication of the podcast. I think a lot of you know this. As part of this, we're going to discuss dropping our YouTube backup just internally. Now, I've maintained that for probably a decade, but with just 20 or so people who listen that way, the return on investment just isn't there. It's a fair amount of work, and it's obviously not meant to be a YouTube channel. We don't have tens of thousands of listeners, not even hundreds of listeners. So it's just probably not something that we're going to continue unless Dr. Nelson wants to start a YouTube dedicated channel to help, build into his ecosystem of social media. I am a recluse. I don't do a lot of social media. I've had my accounts hacked before, and it's just, I don't have time for it. It's also noteworthy that back in the day, I created all of our online presence as part of my personal accounts, which was probably a bonehead idea. So this is something that we need to get away from. So Mike, though, looks at this more like part of his business, and he can dedicate a little bit more time, I think. So please stay tuned to our Facebook listeners page, and obviously to what you're going to get through the Nutrition Radio, Iron Radio network on iTunes and that kind of thing. For what it's worth, those of you who are wondering why we do this different network, our old server made it very hard. Once I stepped away for a couple of years, very hard to return to that. And so it just created a huge problem. So that's why we have that Iron Radio, Nutrition Radio network or what have you, that you'll see on Spotify and iTunes and all that kind of thing. Okay, so let's go to the science news.
Strength and muscle sport news.
The one piece I have today, it just surprised me a little. This is from a top-tier journal. This is from Nature. The surprising cause of fasting's regenerative powers. It says, post-fast feasting helps to activate stem cells in the gut, but can also prompt development of precancerous growths, mouse research shows. So this is August of 2024. This is spanking new stuff. And it's a little bit maybe disturbing. A lot of people do intermittent fasting. So let me read a little bit from this piece. It says, breaking a fast carries more health benefits than fasting itself, a study in mice shows. After the mice had abstained from food, and we'll get to the duration and all that, stem cells surged to repair damage in their intestines, but only when the mice were tucking into their chow again, the study found. So this activation of stem cells came at a price, it says. Mice were more likely to develop precancerous polyps in their intestines if they incurred a cancer-causing genetic change. Now, that's one of the problems we're going to have to think about with this, right? This is rodents. They're almost predestined, as we're going to find out, to get cancer, but they're trying to stack that trigger along with the fast and refeed. So it says these results published in Nature on the 21st of August show that, quote, regeneration isn't cost-free, says Emmanuel Pasegue, a stem cell biologist at Columbia University who wasn't involved in the study. It says there is a dark side that is important to consider. Now, a lot of you guys who do intermittent fasting, I do some of that myself. My wife and I do that. It does create a little bit of concern, but bear with me. In 2018, Omer Yilmaz, a stem cell biologist at MIT in Cambridge, and his colleagues found that stem cells are likely to be implicated. So during fasting, the cells begin burning fats rather than carbohydrates as the energy source. Probably not surprising. Most of your body would be doing that, leading to a boost in their ability to repair damage in the intestines in mice. Now, this leads me to think and just kind of posit that maybe people with IBS could benefit from this especially. I have family members that deal with that. And so if you can help heal some of that damage, that sounds really good. However, people who are predisposed to intestinal polyps, and I am one of them, that makes me think, oh gosh, should I be doing intermittent fasting with big refeeds and that kind of stuff? It says, in their latest work, the researchers studied 3 groups of mice: animals that fasted for 24 hours, those that were allowed to refeed, that is, resume eating for 24 hours after a 24-hour fast, and those that could eat whatever they wanted during the study. It says intestinal stem cells multiplied at the fastest rate in the mice that were given food after the fast. And here's a quote: "There's so much emphasis on fasting and how long to be fasting that we've kind of overlooked this whole idea, this other side of the equation, what is going on the refed state, during the refed state," Yilmaz says. So, again, it's a kind of thing that we have talked about in bodybuilding circles quite a bit. Like, what happens after a long bodybuilding diet? How do you reverse diet? How do you refeed? This is more on a kind of a 24-hour sort of scale. Now, just continuing to dig into this piece, obviously this is sort of it's looking at predisposition toward cancer and whether or not this sort of fast and refeed would kind of push you over the edge. It says researchers should always be concerned about anything that could cause cancer, but Walter Longo, a biogerontologist at the University of Southern California in LA, he said that mice with the tweaked genes were, quote, almost doomed to get cancer, close quote, and that a slight risk found in this study might not be applicable more broadly. Remember, it's just animal data as well, so it's not quite the same kind of thing. Is it enough to give me a little bit of pause as someone who has had precancerous polyps removed? And again, this is very common. That's why you got to get a colonoscopy starting when you're 45 to age 50 or so, depending on what your doctor says. But that's why you get that looked at, because those precancerous ones very often become cancerous. And then you have colon cancer, obviously not good. So this is the kind of thing that does make me concerned. What's the practical, like, personal disclosure? I've typically fasted for about 24 hours. I'll pick a day a week. I did this the last time that I competed, and I got very, very lean, but I was older. I was 43 at the time. Probably my last hurrah as far as pushing fairly high-level regional competitions. And that was sort of something that I just felt I needed above and beyond just a usual bodybuilding diet with carb reduction and all that kind of thing. Over the last 10 weeks, I've been doing this with my wife, and I think what I'm going to do, though, is transition into not eat during the day. And by the way, we don't completely not eat. We do very low-dose protein spiked with a little bit of leucine. So there's some interesting research out of Stu Phillips' lab about if you can put maybe 3 grams or so of leucine into a low dose of protein, literally like 10 grams or so, you can almost get the same protein synthetic response as a full scoop of protein, for example. So that's kind of what we would do, is every couple of hours we would just sip a small dose of protein, trying to spare muscle tissue. We're usually a little bit sore from lifting and all that kind of stuff. So that was really our approach. I think what I'm going to do now is just, and again, I'm not changing everything based on a rat study. We're going to do this anyway, is actually just introduce a bodybuilder kind of diet, meaning a lean protein source and a fibrous veg. So chicken and broccoli, round steak and green beans. You get the idea. Maybe like a grilled chicken on a salad, that kind of thing for dinner. And it actually makes it more doable as well. That way you're not, starving your ass off in the evening trying to make it through to the next morning. And according to this study, again, because I was predisposed in that way to intestinal polyps, I feel like maybe I'm not doing the full 24-hour fast and a massive refeed. We're usually very controlled in our refeed anyway. The day after, if you look at the literature, it's pretty clear. There's a lot of storage enzymes, I'm not going to go through which ones, that are trying to store fats and carbohydrates, and because you just fasted. Your body's like, I don't know what you just did to me, but I'm going to put this stuff back. And so we purposely eat rather, low carb and low fat the following day, but obviously lots of regular food, meaning solid food. So yeah, chicken. Yeah, I might have some carbs to put back my glycogen stores. You get the idea. But we don't go hog wild during the refeed. And I don't know what these mice did, but if they went ad libitum and let them just eat as much as they wanted the following day, they might have gone pretty nuts. So that's also part of this, like how much of a refeed. I'm a big fan of controlling that refeed day. So there's the story. There's the news. Let's go to an early break here. Again, we're going to have a brief episode because it's just me. And then after the break, we're going to talk about top bodybuilding questions answered. So we'll be back. Hey everybody, Iron Radio is back and in an expanded way. What can you expect? Well, first, you can get it simulcast every week on the nutritionradio.org network as well as on the original podcast. It'll appear regularly on iTunes, Spotify, and all your favorite podcasting sites. We have a new Iron Radio /Nutrition Radio Facebook page as well. Please check us out. We're even backed up on YouTube. We hope that an expanded presence will get you the news, education, banter, and guests that's made Iron Radio's community so loyal from the start. You are appreciated. All right, everybody, we are back with this brief episode. Again, it's just Lonnie Lowery handling this today. The other co-hosts are away. The topic is top bodybuilding questions answered. And what I mean by that is that you could look on the internet, and I looked at a couple sites. This is in part from muscleandstrength.com if you want to go look. I'm going to just pose 3 questions that people often ask via Google or whatever, and then give an answer. Is this the ultimate answer? No. In fact, I'd love to get the responses from the other co-hosts on this as well. But I did bodybuild competitively for a couple of decades, so at least here is a bodybuilder's perspective. Number 1, will performing cardio several times per week slow my gains? Now, a lot of you have already addressed this question. A lot of this, to me, depends on what do we mean by several. If you're going to do intense cardio for an hour a day, almost every day, yeah, I think that might. If you're an ectomorph, right, you're thin, angular kind of person, low body fat, you probably don't want to be draining a ton of calories. You need to get in a calorie surplus. That's not just eating. Sometimes that's reducing physical activity and learning to sit and rest and grow, like when you're sore, for example. So will performing cardio several times per week slow your gains? In general, no. There's nothing really wrong. There was some studies we've talked about over the years on Iron Radio where they looked at military people who were doing lots and lots of endurance type work and the lifting, and it did hamper their gains a little bit. I think a lot of it depends on how experienced you are. If you're a noob and if you're thin, yeah, you might want to limit the amount of cardio that you do. You do need to have some type of cardio base to get through enough volume in the gym to build tons of muscle. Really, you can get really robust protein synthesis with maybe 3 sets of compound movements. You know, some squats, rows, military presses, benching. You get the idea. Compound multi-joint movements. But yeah, if you are very experienced and you've built a big base of muscle mass, yeah, you can go do probably more cardio. I doubt you're going to wheedle away all of your muscle mass because you go do some HIIT training, like bike sprints or something, let's say 3 or 4 times a week. It's probably not going to make any difference to you. But again, it depends on if you're naturally thin and new and you undereat. It could reduce. It could slow down some things. You're sort of, Phil would say, chasing 2 rabbits, right? The man who chases 2 rabbits doesn't eat. In other words, you're trying to go for gains and a bunch of adaptations that aren't necessarily the same, right? Like mitochondrial density and heart function and all that kind of stuff that you get from cardio, maybe not the same as just putting actin and myosin together, contractile proteins in muscle tissue. So that's number 1. Number 2, will I lose a lot of muscle if I take a week off from training? Now, I'm surprised this is even a common question. The short answer is no. No, you're not going to lose muscle mass by taking a week off. Now, again, if you just started a program, that's probably not good. You might fall out of the habit. You don't want to, create this sort of habitual, I'm going to the gym when I want, I'm taking a week off when I want. That's no bueno. But if you're an experienced lifter, hell no. And even if you're a beginner to intermediate and you're on a regular training program, a week, honestly, for a lot of people who train, let's say, 3 or 4 times a week, you do a 2 on, 1 off, like bodybuilding split, like a push-pull split or something like that. taking a week off is probably just going to help. You build back your glycogen. You probably get a bigger pump when you return to lifting and all that kind of thing. Fortress and I used to talk about like strength loss and visible size loss. If you're an intermediate or beyond, you could take a month off from training probably and come back probably better than ever. So it's not that kind of, it's more psychological than it is biological, right? Any worries that you might have. But a week, no way. And like I said, if you're intermediate or advanced, maybe even a month. Number 3, and the last one for today, because we're going to keep this brief. Is there a magical rep range? Well, I take offense at the word magical, right? I'm a scientist, so I know what they're saying, like optimal. Jarrell just talked just a couple of weeks ago. I'd go back and listen through some of the episodes about doing, I think he was talking about doing 3 sets of 10 versus 10 sets of 3. This is something that Chad Waterbury and some other people have talked about over the years in bodybuilding circles. No, there's not a magical rep range. I really like the way Phil has done this. He actually introduced me to this concept of just getting a total dose of iron. And I don't mean milligrams of eaten iron. I mean literally number of reps times weight. Like how many reps are you going to get in a realistic range of intensity, like weight, percent of your 1 rep max? So is there a magical rep range? No. The short answer is I would mix this up. I personally still like undulating periodization, or at least a modified version where some days you do heavy low rep, and that might mean more sets. And other days you do lighter kinds of, 10, 15 reps, even 20 reps. Again, back to Stu Phillips' lab, but they did some fascinating stuff with people doing like 30% of their 1 rep max. So not heavy at all, light weights. But 23 reps, I think, on average they were doing, and they were maxing out muscle protein synthesis. I don't want you to think that you can build as much muscle doing that kind of what a layperson would call toning high rep stuff. Probably not. But you do get a robust protein synthetic response if you push yourself. I personally gravitate toward about 5 reps just as a preference. So I have to force myself to go do those higher rep, higher volume days. They're more glycogen and fuel depleting, but they're easier on your joints. They help me get more volume, if you will, or total dose, if you will. And going back and forth is good, right? Because you have days like that spare your joints, and then you might have heavier days, which I do think are important to building size and density, not to mention strength, right? As you get stronger, you're probably going to get bigger and bigger. Clearly, these things diverge a little bit. When you get more advanced, you can become stronger without being necessarily that much bigger, equally bigger. But for the most part, yeah, bigger and stronger. And this kind of mix it up thing, I think, is helpful to spare joints and get enough volume in. So that's going to be it for today. I'm going to shut up. I know it's boring to hear just one person ramble on, but I wanted to, again, talk about some of this news with the fasting and refeeding, and then those top bodybuilding questions answered, at least by somebody who's done it before, by an experienced competitor. So that's it, and we'll be back next time with the usual crew. Take care. Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like what we do, the professors, the scientists, the bodybuilding show promoters, the athletes themselves in powerlifting and bodybuilding, please consider making a donation or maybe buying something from the ironradio.org store. We also are accepting supporting members. So for $4 a month, which is frankly less than the bank sneaks out of your account in fees, you can step up and support a form of sort of public radio for the bodybuilding and powerlifting and strength community. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.